Hello my friends, it is time for another video, and that is my favorite books of 2021. And this is a video that I've been really excited to make, but I wanted to wait until my reading year was officially over. And so now that it is, I'm ready to talk to you about what my favorite books were this year. And there were some things that I really loved. One important thing about this video is that this is not actually a ranking. I struggle greatly with ranking things in order. Like, I can do them in tiers, okay? But I'm really bad at just ranking things and choosing my favorites of things. So these are not in order. These are actually roughly in the order that I read them this year. This is just me gushing about the books that I loved this year. So the first two that we're gonna go with, and this is probably going to be a shock to precisely no one. Well, actually, I read these before I started BookTube, so there may be a few people that have not heard me talk about this, but this is a very well-loved series, and that is Mistborn Era 1 by Brandon Sanderson. I read the actual first novel in this series in 2020, so that's not technically here, but I read The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages in January of 2021, and they deserve to be on this list. This series is definitely one of my favorites of all time. I'm a big Brandon Sanderson fan after catching up on like his major works in the Cosmere, but after reading Stormlight and Mistborn, I feel right calling myself a huge fan of his. And honestly, Mistborn just has so many things that I love about Sanderson. It has his like intricate world building and intricate magic systems that are so easy to sink your teeth into and explore. Like, there are so many facets of his magic systems that you can learn about, and so many cool ways that the characters can use them. And he weaves his world building and magic so well together with the characters and their plots. There are so many characters that I really love in the Mistborn trilogy. The main protagonist, Vin, is one of them. I love watching her grow throughout the series. I would highly recommend picking up the Mistborn trilogy if you are anyone really who hasn't read it. Like, even if you're new to fantasy, I think that you can read this series because Sanderson has the type of storytelling, in my opinion, where it's as complex as you want it to be, because there are tons of like subreddits and like places on the internet where you can go to theorize in depth about his Cosmere and his worlds, but he also helps you along when you're learning about his world. And his prose are pretty simple, and I think that like you can fall anywhere on that spectrum. You can read it for what it is and experience the story and then put it away, or you can like dive all the way in and want to get super complex and into the nitty-gritty. So I think that that's one of the strengths, is that you can kind of do it either way and you can enjoy it however you would like to. The second book on this list is Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, which is the second book in the Gentleman Bastards series. And this is another one where there's so much that I could say about it. Actually, this is the sequel to The Lies of Locke Lamora. If you have not read the series, this is the first book. So I read this last year, which is why it's not on this list, but I read Red Seas Under Red Skies this year in 2021. And so basically the first novel in this series follows like Locke and Jean and like a few of their fellow kind of thieves. They are a very interesting cast of characters because they are thieves and they are kind of like, I mean, they're kind of criminals. Like, they're not the good guys exactly, but they have a great found family dynamic and a great friendship group to follow. And if like heists and smart and complex plots are a buzzword for you, then this would be such a high recommendation from me, because I love like a heist story, and that is essentially what Locke Lamora and his friends do in these books, except the setting changes a little bit from the first to the second book. And as you might guess from the title, Red Seas Under Red Skies, this is a little bit more of a seafaring, out on the water, like out on ships type of book, and honestly I thought that it was just as good as the first one. I gave both of these books 5 stars. I've loved both of them so much, and the character, like, there is such a perfect tone for me with Scott Lynch's writing, where the characters are funny and the banter between all the characters is funny, but Scott Lynch's prose is awesome, and he kind of makes like this sassy comedy style into an art form. Sassy isn't even the right word for it. It's just funny. Like, it's this undercurrent of comedy throughout the whole book, but it goes dark in the right places, it goes lighthearted in the right places, and wow, I just want to reread this book now that I'm talking about it. But it's the type of book where there are plots within plots, and you don't necessarily know everything, but you know enough to be intrigued and engaged and to want to carry on and to find out more. But Locke is the type of character that always has another trick up his sleeve, so I love that about him, and I love that kind of mystery overhanging everything. And God, I just love these books. I really wish that the 4th book in this series would come out so that I wouldn't be so afraid to read the 3rd one. So even though I'm not caught up on it, that series, the Gentleman Bastard series, is another huge A+ recommendation from me. Next up on the list is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, which is a book that I have been advocating for all year to everyone ever since I read it. This book, in my opinion, just has so many things going for it. I mean, Neil Gaiman is obviously a huge name. People, like, he is well respected as an author. People know that he is good. And I think that this book is a great place to start with him. It's a standalone, although a lot of his books are. And it's also very short, because this is the illustrated edition, and it is still pretty, like, small. And this is just a very, like, easy and quick read. This story essentially follows a man who comes back to the place where he lived when he was a child, and he sort of falls into memories, and he remembers a few of the things that happened to him when he actually lived there as a child. And there is definitely, I would definitely call this book magical realism, because there are some really interesting supernatural things going on, and the whole tone of the book is kind of whimsical, but it's also grounded in a really neat way, because what I like to think of it as is a horror novel from the perspective of a child, where the things that are happening might not be huge in scope when you look at it in broader terms, but it encompasses a child's world, and it would be a huge thing to happen to them in their life. And the thing I like about the magical realism aspect of this story is that nothing ever really needs to be fully explained. It's explained to you enough that you can follow and know what's happening in the story, but you're kind of left with the feeling that you don't fully understand what happened, which I think is really appropriate, because I don't know if anybody, like the main character included, really fully understands what happened in the past. And it's just a really, like, it's spooky, and it's whimsical, and it's just wonderful. And I think that everybody should read The Ocean at the End of the Lane. The next book on my list is another standalone, and that is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by... The next book on my list is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. And I think at this point, after BookTube, like, everybody and their mother knows about this book, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But for the most part, this is the story of, like, a magical social worker, essentially, like a caseworker that works with magical children and orphanages that house magical children. And he gets assigned a case to go to this orphanage that is a house in the Cerulean Sea. And the children here are special, they require special care, it's a special circumstance, and when he gets there, he finds himself kind of, like, caught up in the environment of this place, and definitely going through some personal changes and personal growth and learning while he's here. And this is just a very wholesome story with, like, a lot to love about it, and I fell in love with it, and I'm very happy that I read it. This is just like a warm hug, and sometimes we need that, especially with the way the world is right now. So Highly recommend. Okay, so the next thing on my list, I'm not gonna get these books down just because I'm afraid that I would cause a book avalanche if I tried. That is gonna be The Wheel of Time, but specifically the 3 books that I want to put on this list of my favorites of the year are The Great Hunt, which is the 2nd book, The Dragon Reborn, which is the 3rd book, and The Shadow Rising, which is the 4th book. And The Shadow Rising is my personal favorite, but all 3 of those books, like books 2 through 4 in the series, I gave 5 stars to all of them. I loved all of them so much, and I don't even know how I can explain The Wheel of Time. Like, I don't know how I can actually talk about this, because The Wheel of Time is just an incredibly epic series. I mean, a lot more people know about it now, to be fair. Now that the TV show has come out, it has definitely inspired a new wave of readers of the books. And if you picked up the 1st book and you liked it, I guess this is just me encouraging you and saying how much I adored books 2 through 4 of this series. I don't know, I'm a big sucker for an epic world and an expansive story, and The Wheel of Time has both of those things. And the things that were done with the plots in those second 3 books, or you know what I mean, books 2 through 4, were just so engaging to me, and yeah, I really, really loved my reading experience with those. So next up is another book that is kind of at the bottom of a pile, unfortunately, so I'm not going to actually hold it up, but I'll put the cover up, and that is Guards Guards by Terry Pratchett. So I have gotten into the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett this year, which is, it's also hard to explain, but I think that the Discworld series at least all takes place on one world, the Discworld, and it floats through space on the backs of 4 elephants that are on the back of a giant turtle. I hope I got that right. But just by that explanation alone, you can see that Terry Pratchett writes some fantastic, satirical fantasy and sort of absurdist fantasy, but what makes his books so good is that they are grounded in real social commentary. And Guards Guards is the story of Samuel Vimes is the main character that we follow, and along with a man named Carrot, who comes to the city that our story takes place in. So Samuel Vimes is the captain of the City Watch, or the Night Watch of the City Watch, and Carrot joins the Watch, and the Watch has this motley crew of characters, and they start to have some interesting problems in the city with dragons. And I guess I don't really want to say too much more than that, because it is really just a ride that should be taken yourself, because there is nothing that can compare and really properly explain Terry Pratchett and the experience that is Terry Pratchett until you actually read one of his books. But they just bring me joy. They're so funny, and I thought Guards Guards was damn near perfect. Seriously, it's a perfect book. One thing that I should have mentioned at the start of the video is that I didn't impose any rules for myself in this, so maybe that would have been important to say up front. But yeah, I'm just kind of going with the flow and telling you about the books that I love, and whatever books from whatever series those may be. So my next entry onto this list is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham, and specifically my favorite of these books was An Autumn War, which is the 3rd book, and I think that that's the only book from this quartet that I actually gave 5 stars. But The Long Price Quartet is a case of the sum of this series. This series is more than the sum of its parts. So even though I didn't think any of the other 3 books aside from An Autumn War were perfect, what Daniel Abraham does with the series as a whole, I do think is just fantastic and really close to being perfect, because he, in the first couple of books, focuses really well on small scale storytelling, and he introduces you to the world and introduces you to the characters in really character driven stories that continue throughout the series, but it allows you to really connect yourself early on, and then as things slowly increase in scope and in stakes, you're just kind of, you're connected to the characters and you're really invested the whole way through. And like, I think that his plots in all of them are really well crafted. I do think that the first book is the weakest for that, but I still think that they're really well done in all of them. But the themes that we're exploring and the personal journeys of the characters, they're started masterfully in the first book, and they extend all the way through, and they are wrapped up so masterfully in the fourth book. And I have in-depth discussion videos on the second, third, and fourth books in this series with Ben posted on my channel, so I will have those linked. But yeah, we've talked for probably a total of like, well, more than 3 hours about this series on YouTube. So there's so much for me to say, but this is a series that I will just continue thinking about for so long, and I'm really excited to read more from Daniel Abraham next year, because this is definitely one of my favorite series of all time now. Maybe I shouldn't have taken so many books out of here at one time, but remember how I said there were no rules? So that's gonna apply here, because these are the first 3 books of the Books of Babble, and I am putting all 3 of these on my list for favorites of the year. I'm essentially putting this series, the Books of Babble, on my favorites of the year list, except not Fall of Babble, unfortunately, the 4th book and the final book. I gave all 3 of these first 3 books, Senlin Ascends, Arm of the Sphinx, and The Hod King, 5 stars. Like, each of these individually, I loved each of them. I adored them. They each got 5 stars. And unfortunately, I just didn't love Fall of Babble as much. So like, the 4th book being like that still got like 4 stars from me. It wasn't a bad book, but I just didn't love it as much as I did the first 3. And the series wrapping up that way meant that it was still a good series, but it did prevent it from like being a new all-time favorite or anything like that. So I am disappointed that that happened, but that's why the first 3 books are going on my favorites of the year, because I thought that they were fantastic and top-notch. So yeah, it's my channel and I make the rules, and the first 3 books of this series are going on this list. I'm gonna cause my entire bookshelf to topple if I keep taking so many things off of it like this. But my next entry on this list is The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee, which, oh my goodness, starts with Jade City, continues with Jade War, and then my microphone is gonna love this. And then this series was wrapped up in November of this year with Jade Legacy. So I'm gonna put this back on the shelf before I cause a structural abnormality. So the way that people love to describe the Greenbone Saga is basically like a fantasy version of The Godfather. And I think that that's pretty accurate. Like, it is basically like an organized crime society that has a magic system that relies on jade, as in like the gemstone jade. And this series, like, I loved it because it is so grounded and character focused, and it kind of just deals with stakes on a very intimate level, and it focuses on these character relationships, and it focuses on a clash between 2 clans from the same city, basically warring over their city and their country, because both of them want to come out on top and control things, like control jade trade and control like districts of the city and everything like that. So this is a high stakes story in the sense that these clans can be very violent. They have a certain code of honor, but what flies in this world is not the same as what flies in our world, even though it's an interesting contrast, because a lot of what goes on in this world outside of the clans very much resembles like current modern day. Like, you have cities that are composed of skyscrapers, people work in office buildings, they live very much day-to-day lives that are modern. And so I love the way that this is interwoven, the magic and the clans, and the way that they actually function, not as government, but sort of alongside government. Our characters are very compelling. They are not necessarily like always good guys. They are morally gray, although they do, like I said, run by their own code in this society. I do think that Fond du Lis has such well-crafted characters in this series, and I just, like, I don't know, now that this series is finished and that I have been privileged to read it and finish it, I just want to recommend it to everyone, because after Jade Legacy, this definitely is a favorite series of all time for me. And I'm not going to spoil anything other than just giving you, like I did, the main concept behind these books. And I can only just like urge you to read them because they were so good. Okay, the final entry on my favorite books of 2021, and I tried to determine whether this is just recency bias or not, but regardless, I'm putting it here, and that is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden, because I honestly just fell in love with this book and the way that Katherine Arden told this story. And The Bear and the Nightingale is this very atmospheric, very fairy tale-esque story about this sort of like backwoods town in historical Russia, with our main character Vasya being born into her family in this like forest town. And you kind of explore how her bloodline goes back a long way and has some very interesting and very intriguing magic in it. And she sort of like has to grow and learn as a girl in this society where she fits in, because she is sort of like a free-spirited girl. And the thing about the catalyst of this book is essentially when Vasya's father remarries, and her new stepmother doesn't want to basically play along with their traditional religions. So these people, they worship God, but they also have these old spirits that they respect in like Russian folklore. And they are kind of pressured not to honor these spirits anymore. Like, they are pressured to become more and more Christian, and there is like other factors that are informing this decision as well for these townspeople, but this is a decision with consequences, let's just say. And I love, maybe because I don't know that much about Russian history or Russian folklore, this felt simultaneously very magical and whimsical and like fairy tale-esque, while also feeling really grounded in Russian history. And I didn't know where it was going, because I don't know like these stories and this type of folklore. And I loved Vasya as a main character. I loved the wintry atmosphere of this book. I literally just loved everything about it. So that's why it's here. Even though I just read it like a week ago, it was the type of book where I did not want to put it down. It is rather short, but I was reading more than 100 pages a day of it because it was just so compelling. And it, like, that's a great word for it, is compelling, because I've heard people describe this as atmospheric, but usually when I think of something atmospheric, I don't think of it also having a compelling plot, and maybe that's a me thing, but for me, this had both, and it was a perfect combination of the two, and I would just recommend this to like everyone. So yeah, there you go. So those were my favorite books and or series and or did not give myself rules for this video of the year 2021. They were just my favorites. So I read so many great things this year, and I know that I kind of stretched this list by putting a lot of books on it, but I just didn't feel like I could leave any of them out. They all deserved recognition because they were just fantastic, and I would love to hear your thoughts on these. What are some things that you loved this year? Do you disagree with any of my choices? Do you agree? Please let me know. I really hope that you liked this video. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!